So a key part of my job as a managing editor is to ensure that the work we do in terms of the production end delivers on strategy, the objectives. And a key part of that job is also to maintain quality. So here's a quote that I like. A lot of quotes going on. I'm a big fan of a quote. I've cited my people, unlike Mike. Information is of no use if obscured by poor, jargon-ridden, and dense language. So if you go online, click on a link, do a search, the likelihood is that you're going to come across kind of average, ineffective, or substandard content, depending on what you're looking for. Whether it's misleading headlines or uninspiring content, a lot of what exists on the internet, unfortunately, is middle of the road, average, and ineffective. So if you have a particular user need, if you're looking for, let's say, car insurance quotes and you Google it, the information you get, the likelihood is that it's going to be relatively of interest to you, but potentially ineffective. Trying to find really, really good content is actually quite difficult. But when you do, you recognize that it is useful. So if I'm looking for, let me think of an example, a destination guide so I'm taking my girlfriend to Paris next month, I Google Paris attractions, I find an article that delivers on that, and if it's useful and impactful, you'll remember that. Not only remember the piece of content, you're likely to remember the publisher or the organization behind it that's producing it. So the next time you go on holiday, you will likely go to that publication. So the important thing about good content is that it sends out a signal, and the signal that it sends out is that quality is a fundamental part of your organization. So if you're doing good content well, the likelihood is that your product offering or your service offering is also really, really good. So the kind of people that it's sending a signal out to is Google, for one, your stakeholders, your customers, and to your competitors, that we as an organization pride ourselves on quality. So good content, what does it say? It says that you care about producing good stuff and your audience. It says that you have high standards, that you're not willing to take shortcuts or invest in short-term gains. It says that you are reliable. So if you're consistently producing good quality content, the likelihood is that your services and your products are going to follow that similar pattern. It also says that you are thoughtful and thorough. So you think before you act, you plan, you have an idea of what this content is going to do. Finally, good content says to me, I'm sure it does to you guys as well, that you are a leader in your space. Also, Google values good content. How many of you guys have been involved in content since, I don't know, the early days of, like, let's say 2009, 10, 11? Who remembers what content was like back then? The kind of content that we used to produce en masse, keyword stuffed. What's the word for hidden content? That's white text? Yeah. So what was that, sorry? That's it, yeah. Google back then obviously wasn't as sophisticated as it was then, so you could get away with it. Quality, however, regardless of that, has always been an issue. So in traditional publishing, the kind of environment that I'm from, quality has been a constant issue. So some of my preparation for this was, I was reading a book by Harold Evans. Anybody know Harold Evans? Google him. He's a top journalist, but he's talking about editing in the 70s and 80s, and he's saying that, even in publishing back then, quality was a huge issue. Good content also stands out, as I mentioned earlier. If you come across a good article that's useful and that will help you as a user, then you're likely to remember it. Also, it has a positive impact on your business. It improves brand perception. So recently, I moved house in London, which was painful. I signed up to a new broadband provider. So this is not digital content, this is actual physical copy. And the instructions that so I'll tell you the name of the provider later on, but the instructions that they had were brilliant, fantastic, really useful, to the point, and it's something that I remember. And now my perception of this brand has improved. An important one for me is that it encourages better, more purposeful and meaningful engagement with your organization. Your content isn't designed to appeal to everybody, it's designed to appeal to a particular user at a particular time. And finally, which I'm sure most people are interested in, is that increased profitable customer action. Eventually, for me, a key thing that I like to get across is let's not focus on short-term gains. Let's think about the kind of bigger, longer picture. So if you look at something like Google over the years has established itself as a conduit for finding good information. Hence, it has become a verb. So now that we know the impact that good quality content has, I'm going to talk about the key aspects that I, as a managing editor, and you guys as who do we have here in terms of content marketing managers, writers, editors? Can you just get a show of hands? Okay, cool, a few. So these are the aspects that I tend to use on a day-to-day basis to help me produce good and effective content. So we have writing detailed briefs, using talent effectively, and reviewing all copy. I'll go through each one of these right now. So a goal without a plan is just a wish. And I believe this is pronounced correctly. So Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, I think. So the purpose of a content brief is to ensure that whatever objectives you guys have set out in your content strategy is delivered. The other purpose of a brief is to ensure that whoever you're commissioning understands what they need to deliver and why they're delivering it. So without a brief, you're kind of shooting in the dark, you've got no plan, it's content really for content's sake. Sometimes that's fine, but on the whole, if it hasn't really got a goal, it's just dead copy. So there are two kind of briefs that we use at Melt, which is something I recommend you guys invest in. I'll be interested to hear your thoughts afterwards about approaches that you guys might have. So on the one hand, we've got instructional. So these tend to be extremely detailed. So we're looking at step-by-step guides. So this is how you should write the intro. This is what we would like in the intro. This is the body text, and these are the sections broken down. You know, so really granular. These tend to be really kind of useful for landing pages, especially if you do them on kind of a bulk scale. So anything beyond 500, for example, especially for updating landing pages, or similarly themed articles. So let's say you're doing a neighborhood guide for Paris or Berlin or Lisbon. Having a similar themed brief will help you produce good content. These tend to be kind of a one-off, so per project you will fundamentally write just one brief, but with each, let's take travel for example, with each destination, Lisbon, Barcelona, you'll vary the brief ever so slightly. So Lisbon's known for its fish, so you might have a bigger section on fish, for example, for Lisbon. Barcelona, and you might have a bigger section on music. The next kind of brief is informative, so equally detailed, but you're less prescriptive. This is more of a general kind of overview. It's useful for a wide range of articles, so things like news, blogs, features, and the like. And it's fairly original brief per commission. Now, the reason that we use this is that we want the writer to take a bit more of a direction in terms of how that content looks. You've got a general idea of what you want. You've got a brief that explains what you want, but in terms of the actual substance, you're letting the writer kind of make a decision. That's really good for coming up with kind of unintended outcomes, interesting information, things that you can't really plan for. So what to include? So this applies to both instructional and informative, kind of generic information. So background and overview, background as to the project, what it's about, what you're trying to achieve. That's kind of useful contextual information for your writers. Deliverables, this is kind of like the key components of what it is you're actually producing. So is it a listicle? Is it a landing page? How many words is it? What keywords are you going to use, and so forth. Target audience, you're looking at who are you trying to engage with this content? What are their needs? What kind of content will they respond to? Structure, this applies a bit more to the instructional element where you're just outlining how the article should look. Useful links, if you've got certain organizations that are reliable in terms of delivering useful information, it's useful to make recommendations. As of late, we've started to include sample copy, just so that it gives a writer an indicator of the kind of style of what we're looking for. And finally, tone of voice and style guide, little bits and bobs that are really useful for producing on-brand content. So I'm just going to look at a couple of examples of briefs that we've put together. So this is a hotel room description. It's one section of a hotel guide. As you can see here, we've been extremely granular. So we, as editors, understand what it is we want. we might as well say it, and we might as well be really explicit about it. So in this instance, when we get back a piece of copy, we shouldn't really have any surprises. What I'm looking for in this instance is a number of guest rooms and general room types. We're looking at room details, we're looking at room amenities, and so forth. We've also included in this brief information that we don't want. So if you look at hotel descriptions, it's quite commonplace to include the usual free Wi-Fi and TVs, but usually when you go to a hotel, those are the kind of things that you want. But had I not mentioned this, the likelihood is that a writer may put that information in there. Is it useful? Yeah, it's something that you look at, because if you see that and you read that, you might find that interesting. But if you don't want it in there, be quite explicit. So this is another example of an instructional guide. Contrast that with this one. It's still extremely, extremely detailed, but it's less instructive. We're giving the writer a bit more steer in terms of what it is they want. So if you look at a couple of examples, the intro is just a short line, pithy outline of the location, character and appeal of the city. What that actually is, we're leaving it up to the writer. And again, down below with the key neighborhoods area, the top 3 rationales. If we were being really prescriptive, we might want to outline each of those. But in this instance, we feel comfortable enough to leave that to the writer. Finally, our kind of really informative brief, which is really, really short. You'll have included the usual information like keywords, style, tone, but really what I'm asking the writer to do is this. So in 20 words or less, I'm asking them to come up with 10 compelling reasons why this destination is a great city to visit. That is it, that's my instruction. In terms of what they deliver, I have no idea, but you would expect them based on the brief and your relationship with them to deliver really, really good content. So some takeaways. Your brief is designed to give each piece of content purpose, be detailed. I'm talking be really prescriptive. Sometimes your briefs might end up being 1,000 words and you're commissioning a 500-word article. There's nothing wrong with that. If you know what you want, be instructive so that nothing gets misinterpreted. I'm sure a lot of the writers and editors here have had instances where they've gone backwards and forwards with all the editing. And also vary the kind of brief you use, depending on the work you're doing and who you're working with. So next section is on talent. So great talent can be a source of true competitive advantage. Although it's a bit of a cliche, this line, which is something I touch upon later. It's not what you do, it's who you know. No, it's not what you know, it's who you know. Got there. So what I recommend is that from the outset of any given project, or whether it's a monthly retainer, you have a core team that you're working with internally and externally. You're looking at a mixture of writers and editors, and sub-editors is a key role. Do we work with any sub-editors? Anybody? Yeah? Yes. So this is something that has been kind of neglected since publishing became a bit digitized. So the idea was that as a writer, you're able to edit. As a writer, you're a photographer. As a writer, you're a filmmaker. So sub-editors have kind of been pushed aside, and that role, that kind of speciality was overlooked. Now you'll notice when a sub-editor hasn't been used because they bring a particular skill set that makes a massive difference to your copy. So what to look out for when it comes to talent. So three key areas. So expertise. So with writers, it's the ability, it's stating the obvious, but it's the ability to write well, to write a brief, and to write in various ways. With subject specialists, it's an authority in their area. So as Dan touched upon, a lot of our clients and a lot of our focus is travel-based. We work with a lot of travel specialists, but travel specialist is kind of a bit of a loosey-goosey word. You know, what I would expect from a travel specialist is like a destination expertise, but I'd also expect them to understand the business end of it. I expect them to know the latest happenings within travel, as opposed to nice pictures for Instagram. Breadth and depth. So if you're an editor and you're working for an agency and you've got multiple clients, so retail, healthcare, travel, for me, breadth and depth is important when you're developing your network. So I've got contacts in motoring, I've got contacts in travel, healthcare, cybersecurity. Having that network that you can rely on in any given moment is a really useful asset. Talent. also gives me peace of mind. So when it comes to commissioning work, I've got a core group of writers that I'm comfortable with. It also gives me access to a scarce resource. Now, for me, finding genuine talented writers and editors is quite a challenge. So when you come across somebody that is the bee's knees, there's someone to invest in, and cultivating really, really good relationships with your freelancers or even your internal team is really, really important. And finally, working with talent is a form of quality insurance. If you're comfortable commissioning writers to produce certain articles, the likelihood is that with that relationship that you're going to get back something that is good. So 2 types of people that you should look to invest in. First is kind of generic writers, so also known as journalists, copywriters. The likelihood is that they would have received some sort of formal training. It could be a journalism qualification, it could be professional writing, masters. They've definitely had some sort of formal training. Naturally, the advantages of using them is that their expertise is that they can write all sorts of copy, so news, social media, white papers. They're quite adept at producing that copy. Cons is that they may lack particular industry experience. You know, they can be a good writer but have no authority in any given subject. Contrast that with subject specialists, also known as experts, influencers, industry professionals. They're likely to have in-depth knowledge and experience, which is invaluable. So when it comes to producing content, they can bring a certain level of insight that a typical writer wouldn't. Those nuances of detail are really, really useful. The cons, and this is based on my own personal experience, that they're not necessarily versatile or skilled writers. So when it comes to the editing stage, a lot of their work, even though the body copy is interesting and on brand, actually needs a lot of work to make it a bit more readable. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples of copy produced by a copywriter and copy produced by a travel specialist. So this is Berlin Zoo, which is a short description. It's unedited, so this is what we describe as raw copy. If you all have a little read, and just, see at the back. Yeah, can you read this at the back? Yeah. Sorry, say that again? Oh no, it's.
I think what we'll do is in the break, I saw somebody mention that on Slido, we'll try and adjust it to try and make sure that you guys at the back can see.
I'll just go through it anyway. But so it's relatively interesting. It's got highlights, and it's got what you can see and do. However, for me, it kind of reads like a product description. And for some bizarre reason, in this instance, the author has decided to focus on the highlight as being the hippopotamus aquarium. I've no idea why that is the case. And if you look at these final sentences at the end, they're in effect repeating themselves over and over again. All they've really done is change the kind of description of the animals that you can see. Could it pass? Yes. Is it useful? Not so much. This is the kind of stuff that you'd expect to find on on Berlin Zoo's website. So contrast it with this, which is a little blurb on Mauer Park Flea Market and the Berlin Wall. You can see the difference immediately. So for me, this section has a lot more flow. It's a lot more lively. It's emotive. It's also got correct use of some German spelling. And the way they drop in the word combine, even though it's just a subtle single word, is really, really useful. So it's almost as though the person writing this is like the tour guide, and there's an authenticity about it that makes it interesting. The information, again, is quite generic, but on the whole, it reads really, really well. So key takeaways from that section is develop a network with breadth and depth, assemble a mix of talent per project, plan in advance, which is hugely, hugely important. So if you've got a project kicking off and you've got no team and the writer that you want to use is busy, well then you're at a loss. And that happens more often than not. And finally, build good relations with your network, because I've had contacts from 2011 and it's now 2018. And it's been advantageous for me across all the agencies that I've worked for. So moving on to the final section. To write simply is as difficult to be good. So the writers in here, I'm sure that's something that you can empathize with. So, final section is on reviewing all content and doing it precisely. For me, this is one of the most important aspects. So you've written a detailed brief, you've commissioned the work, you've used talent. Even then, mistakes can get through. So this is a final kind of barrier against that. So what are the reasons for editing? It's to make sure that work is on brand, that the tone of voice is correct. It's to make sure that the work is to brief, so you're delivering on your objectives. Most importantly for us, to make sure that your work is well written, so pleasant and easy to read, useful and interesting. And to state the obvious, it's to ensure that you're free of mistakes. In short, with the editing stage, you're wanting the content to be in the best shape it can be. Common mistakes to look out for, and this happens all the time. If you're editing without any experience, these are things that can go missing. So redundancy, so using more words that needs to be, cliches and platitudes. Odd phrases, so one that I've come across is laser blue skies for a travel piece. I've never come across a laser blue sky before. Style quirks, making sure that, for example, Wi-Fi is spelled capped up or capped down, depending on the client. Dullness, there's a lot of matter-of-fact dull content out there. And overstatement, things like mouth-watering or marveling or breathtaking. These are words that are often used. That's not to say that it can't be used, because as human beings, for example, we use cliches on a day-to-day basis. So sometimes it's fine to kind of drop it in. I'm just running short of time, so I'm going to speed up a little bit. This is another important aspect to have. So every time you have a piece of content, go through a kind of robust review process. So you get in your raw copy, you review it. The likelihood is that you'll have to send it back. When you do, make sure you send it back. This is what we like to do: track changes, so the changes are visible, and some feedback. Second draft, again, you're going through the same editing process. At that stage, you should kind of be in the final stage. Then every now and again, we do spot checks, so we get another person to kind of examine the content and make sure we haven't missed anything. Then you submit and publish. So just to go through the mechanics of editing, you've got these two stages. You've got editing, which is the heavy lifting side of it. This is focused mainly on improving structure, comprehension, and relevancy. It can result in major rewriting and can be quite time consuming, but it's a really, really important part of the process. Proofreading, like this tends to happen towards the back end of the editing, but there will be an overlap. This is focused mainly on correcting errors, spelling, grammar, punctuation, and style quirks. So it's a different kind of mindset where you're scrutinizing the copy in more detail. Incorrect use of punctuation, grammatical errors, and style mistakes. So, because I'm getting towards the end, I'll go through these quite speedily. So this is a hotel description for the Dawson Hotel and Spa. If you look at the start of this, most of this is redundant because it's just focused on location. Actually, the key information is at the back, because what we want to focus on here is the best spa. So in this instance, we've just kind of rephrased that and rewritten that, but we'll share this later on so you can have a bit of a read. This is an example of like proofreading. Here are some little mistakes that people can overlook. There should be a space here, there isn't. The word on shouldn't be there. 2, Tuesday to Saturday, technically correct, but for style quirk, we're using an end dash to indicate range, which is also being missed here. This is a hyphen. Little things that tend to get missed, and the word and in this instance is missing. This is my favorite one. Again, another hotel description, really succinct, short, to the point. For me, this seems all right. Just east of Dublin Centre is the Market Hotel, where the sexy rooftop terrace is popular with locals who come to wine and dine. I've never seen a sexy rooftop terrace before. So when it comes to editing, what would you do in this instance? Basically just cut out the word sexy, and you've got a bit more of a pithy, engaging little blurb. So key takeaways: understand what good content is. It's pleasant and easy to read, it's useful and interesting, it's to the point, and it's clear. Be scrupulous in your editing. Editing is something that we take seriously at Melt, and it's time consuming, but quite a lot of fun as well. Deliver regular feedback so that your writers can progress. Encourage writers to edit their own work. That's a skill set that is decidedly lacking. And invest in very trained and skilled sub-editors, because they will make a phenomenal difference to the kind of copy you produce. So to finish, one last quote. People think that I can teach them style. What stuff it all is. Have something to say and say it as clearly as you can. That is the only secret of style. Thank you. Sorry for rushing at the end.